Today on The State of Us, electric vehicle sales set to increase tenfold as manufacturing returns to America. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal, and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson. Today, we're going to look at what would be the nation's most ambitious climate regulation yet. The proposal is designed to ensure that electric cars make up a majority. That's right, a majority of new U.S. auto sales by 2032, according to EPA's new proposed rules being released yesterday. So we're going to look at what do those mean for electric vehicles, but also how is the electric vehicle push stimulating a return in American manufacturing? So we got a lot to talk about today.
Sounds interesting. I think if you've been watching, you know that with EVs coming more and more on board, and we had the pandemic and problems with China, the supply chain issues, we have seen that growth, right, in American manufacturing saying, well, let's make the batteries and the chips here. Then we don't have to deal with other countries and we don't have the supply chain issues that we have. So it makes sense. And so here we have a positive business environment created by those good old electric vehicles.
The EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, announced new auto pollution limits on Wednesday that were intended to ensure that all electric vehicle models make up 54 to 60% of new vehicles sold in the United States by 2030 and 64 to 67% by 2032. Those targets will raise the bar on ambitions outlined by President Biden 2 years ago when he issued an executive order putting the EV target at 50% of new cars by 2030. Transportation today is the largest source of carbon dioxide and other gases linked to changes in the Earth's climate. The Inflation Reduction Act, signed into law last year, provides $7,500 in tax incentives for buyers of electric vehicles, which has helped lift EV purchases. The act also provides billions of dollars to support battery production in the United States and the mining and processing of lithium and other minerals needed for battery cells and electric motors. That's all according to a New York Times article in response to the EPA's release of new rules. So one challenge, obviously, that's posed is that there's a lot of materials right now that we use for EVs that nobody in the U.S. makes.
Right.
So, it's like, well, that's great. There's all this money available, but there's only this money available if companies start producing things in the United States.
I mean, it's a good way to get things jump started. I know I'm not sure that, I'm contemplating right now whether or not, I will buy any new cars. I'm comfortable with what I have. And getting up there in years, I probably will buy something else. Would like to buy an EV. I know both my millennial daughters would like to buy EVs, but the prohibitiveness of it is cost. And I hope that as a boomer who remembers beta versus VHS, and then, VHS winning out, and then the sales of VHS products taking over the economy, that it became very cheap. Everybody, can own a VHS tape, and then DVDs, and, now we stream. And I know all that has changed. My point there is that as new technologies come on board, they are always cost prohibitive. But as you point out, as more and more of them are made, and if you want to have that kind of number by 2030 or 2035, of 2/3 vehicles are EVs, then you're going to have to bring the cost down. You're going to have to make it more competitive. And I think what they're trying to do then, yes, there's this little bit of money that is available if you buy it. That still doesn't bring it down into the range of a gas-powered car or a hybrid. But once you get more products out there for people to buy, then the price should come down. And you think with more being built here and the technology getting better, that too will hopefully bring prices down as well. But that's going to be the key component that I think, because I know many people who aren't afraid of buying an EV. They just don't have the money to buy an EV.
Well, and keep in mind that moving electric vehicle sales to 67% of new passenger vehicles by 2032 would be, truly a quantum leap for the United States. We're in 2023, so in less than 10 years, the goal is to go from 5.8% of vehicles sold last year, which were all electric, to 67%. In under 10 years. So that would be, if it's accomplished, obviously that would be a monumental shift. And there's a lot of things that have to happen, it's not just manufacturers getting on board, it's also the other infrastructure components, like you mentioned, that have to be in place for people to feel comfortable transitioning to this. The other thing, though, that we're seeing manufacturers starting to do, and for example, Chevrolet is doing this right now, or GM, I guess, holistically across their brands, is when you purchase an all-electric vehicle from them, they are now including the installation of a home charging station for you as part, it's not free because, it's quote unquote built into the cost, but we are seeing not just, GM trying to make things more affordable, but even Tesla just announced that, they are dropping the entry-level price of all their vehicles by $1,000, $2,000, and $3,000, I believe, respectively. So not a huge drop, but they're actually reducing the price, not increasing it.
I think the other part, and you explained that very well about the cost if you want to, buy a comparable gas powered, but then you're still talking about so many Americans are renting. And where do you charge your EV if you're a renter? Mm-hmm. And I know you're partly into that because of you are becoming a landlord, and many of your tenants park out on the street. They don't have a garage where they could park, where you could install a charger. And so when you think about the number of people who rent in an open parking lot, how do you sell EVs to them? That's there is the other, I think, problem issue that needs to be fixed. If every 2 out of 3 cars in the next 15 years is going to be an EV, how are all of these people going to charge their cars? Or are they going to be the last of the Mohicans driving the gas powered cars because they have no power, they have no way to charge their car I'm thinking of when unleaded gas replaced leaded gas. Again, being older, I've lived through changes like this, and I know it will eventually happen, but I see that as another issue that somebody's going to have to solve, not to throw it on the government, because I'm not always big on the government solving problems. But you're going to have to do something for renters to encourage them to either buy new EVs, or by 2035, here comes maybe a retail version of used EVs coming. Not because they'll last so long, number one. We've done plenty of shows about how they don't have as many moving parts and they'll last longer. But some people just want to change cars. So there will start to eventually here, I'm assuming, become a retail market for used EVs. But again, if I'm a renter without a garage, I don't care that somebody's offering me a free charger. I got nowhere to put it.
So let's talk about what we're going to do about the charging situation if you don't own a home. Because if you own a home, hopefully the solution it's relatively straightforward. But even if you get into an older home, what are the implications of this? And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the politics of it as well. Obviously, it's interesting that this is all happening as climate activists have been sort of angry at the Biden administration's recent decision to approve this enormous oil drilling project on federal land in Alaska. So, it's kind of this we did this, a little bit of moral licensing maybe by the Biden administration of we did this thing, in Alaska where we're going to let you drill on federal land for oil. But also, by the way, we want to speed the transition.
We're pushing electric powered vehicles.
Right. So we're going to talk about all that. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. So what do you do if you own, or I guess if you don't own, what do you do if you rent an apartment, or you don't have your own house? So maybe you have like a condo, for example, or something like that.
Well, or like me, I have a 4-car parking area,
but no garage.
Well,
you have a garage, but
you can't access it.
But you can't access the garage,
and not because it's full of stuff, which it is.
I was gonna say people
but also because
what do you got?
We built
away?
an addition, and so now we took out the availability of entering the garage with a vehicle because we never used our cars to park in it anyway. So, yeah, but go ahead. Not to interrupt, because not all homeowners necessarily have access to a garage either. So now where do you put these charging stations?
Right. And so, I mean, I think there's a couple different answers to this. One thing that we've seen and talked about before is workplaces. And not just workplaces, but also stores, any place that has a big parking lot, right? Basically putting in chargers. So that's one potential.
Yeah, but when I come home from work, I don't want to have to go to Walmart or Myers.
Well, you don't make a special trip
for a couple hours and charge my car.
Yeah, you don't make a special trip. You charge when you're there for groceries, or when you go out to eat. When you're in the restaurant, you plug in and charge. It's a rethinking of
That's
a
big paradigm shift.
Well,
because
sure.
Right now, when I run low on fuel, I just pull into the nearest gas station.
You make a special stop,
and then I can take
time to fill up a vehicle.
I take 5 minutes so I can continue with my day.
Right.
I don't have to reevaluate how I'm going to do this. I mean, if you want me to buy an EV, I want to be able to go to work and come home and take care of the process there. I don't want to take care of it. Well, I'm going to go out and eat on Friday. So if I milk my EV, I can charge it when I eat on Friday. That is, if somebody else didn't have the same plan, because you're talking about a paradigm shift. So if all of a sudden everybody starts to do that, then these charging stations aren't going to be open, especially if you sell 2/3 of new vehicles are EVs. We don't have enough chargers for that. I know I'm being the contrary old man in today's show.
To be further contrarian, I mean, it's not just, it's great, let's put chargers everywhere. We also have to have the energy grid capacity to meet that demand. It's not just like, right now you say, okay, well, I'm going to put a charger in my home. Well, that's not a big deal because your 20 neighbors also don't have chargers in their homes, Okay, well, if you all have chargers,
where's the electricity coming from?
If your entire neighborhood has chargers, and now just not your neighborhood, but your whole city has chargers, right? It's not a big deal to add that to your house, but it becomes our electric consumption increases, right? And the demand on the grid increases.
Well, wait a minute. My electric bill just doubled in the last 6 months. I'm not using any more energy.
Yep.
But I've
the price of electricity.
Price of electricity has gone up. And if you add all these EVs, then demand on electricity is going to be higher. What's going to happen to the cost? I mean, right now, you EV owners are reaping the benefits because it's cheap energy. But if we keep putting more and more power on, more and more consumption on the electric grid, what's going to happen to the cost?
Well, and I believe that's part of why there's the surface level of this, right? Which is we want more EVs to be sold, but there's this huge trickle down effect because so many Americans own vehicles. 91.7% of households have at least one car.
And only 5% of those are EVs.
Right. Well, no, only 5% of the ones sold last year are EVs.
Oh, okay. So even less
than 5%
are actually EVs running around.
Not even 5% of all cars on the road are.
I understand. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. So the other thing, they're so ubiquitous, and they become such a central component of life that it's yes, we're going to sell more of these, but you think about if 91.7% of households have a car, if the vast majority of Americans end up, that are purchasing new vehicles end up owning EVs, you're going to drastically increase the amount that are on the market. In order to do that, there's all these other connected impacts and effects that we've talked about. And those things impact the economy, right? Because how the power grid's going to change, have to change. I mean, if if car manufacturers are going to do what the EPA is telling them they have to do, I mean, it's not really, I know there's people out there like, oh, grumble, whatever, but it's like, it's not really a choice, right? I mean, you can be mad at the manufacturers, but like a lot of them have already decided they're doing this anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we have an article about Toyota, who has just changed their entire strategy. I mean, they were the leader in hybrids, and they're now their new president is pushing an quote EV first strategy, and even in the Lexus, so which is their really nicer model, and I say that as someone who drives a Toyota Camry. I like the Toyota car. And they're, they were the first in hybrids, and they're pushing electric. So, yeah, I mean, what we're saying here, folks, is, okay, you can do all of this, right? You can mandate it, but it's going to create other issues that nobody has seemingly addressed. And does this mean that Joe Manchin and his West Virginia coal mines become an important part of the growth of the United States? And, how much are we really saving the planet if we have to burn coal to create enough electricity to power all the electric vehicles? And now I don't really believe that, but I mean, am I that far off? I mean,
well, that's part of the transition, right? Of as we're seeing more solar energy coming online, as we're seeing more wind energy coming online, as we're seeing battery technology improve. Remember that the government often in our history has set targets for things for technology that really doesn't yet exist. I mean, you could say that going to the moon is a bit antiquated now because it happened so long ago.
But they're trying to force the technology to be developed by making these demands.
But when our president said we're going to go to the moon, we didn't have the necessary technology or know-how to do that. You know what I mean? That was like, well, that's great. You can say that, but we've got a lot of work to do to make that happen. And we made it happen. So, I mean, as far as, can America make this happen? Well, I sure hope so. I mean, anybody out there that's, a naysayer of, well, we can't do this, it's like, oh, okay. So we can put people on the moon, but we can't figure out how to transition from gas burning vehicles to electric vehicles. Are you kidding? I mean, really, that's what we're saying. We can win world wars and, concentrate the world's power.
But it takes everybody supporting it.
Yes.
And, is that support there? It's not that, I believe
it's not.
I believe in Americanism. I mean, I think is it possible? It certainly is. But we're talking about a very divided country politically and socially right now. And those things that you mentioned that we made happen because the majority got behind it and we supported it as a nation. And right now is there anything that we support as a nation right now?
Yeah.
Other than the fact that we don't like each other? I mean, I really am. I'm hearing myself and it's like, I'm sounding negative, but it's like, we're asking, can we do it? Certainly, I believe we can do it, but we're going to have to do a lot of things, and a lot of us are going to have to get behind it at a time when we're really struggling to get behind anything right now as a nation.
So, I mean, 2% of Americans today own an electric vehicle, but 36%, and this, by the way, I guess I shouldn't say today. This was at middle of 2022 is the most recent survey on this. So 2% own electric vehicles, but according to the San Diego Union Tribune, 71% of Americans say they'd be interested in buying or leasing an electric vehicle. So 36% plan on or are seriously considering buying one currently. 71% say they would be interested in buying or leasing. So interested in, 36% are serious about it, 71% are open to the idea. So, I mean, I guess from that standpoint, Americans agree that they're interested in electric vehicles. You know what I mean? The buzz is there. Okay. Do they all agree why they want an electric vehicle? No. But I don't know that that's necessary to necessarily make this transition. You know what I mean? I'm not sure that we have to agree.
Whether you're Democrat or Republican, if you're interested in having an EV, you're going to push the government to make this happen.
Right.
Or
you're going to at least support when the government does those things.
Right.
Maybe you're not going to be saying, I think the government should do this, but you're not necessarily going to object either when the government does push it. The other thing that I think we don't do enough is, it's that whole, what's the worst thing that happens, right? Because, sometimes, I was actually I was in Advanced Auto Parts the other day, which is a local auto parts store here in town, and got into this conversation with the person working the counter and somebody else that had come in about EVs, and what their concerns or hesitations were, or why they don't want one, or, all these things. And it was just interesting because they're definitely in the 29% of Americans who are not interested in an electric vehicle. To understand, well, why not, or what do they think is the reason not? And, there were some valid concerns, but it's also that weighing what's the alternative, right? Okay, well, the alternative is that we don't change anything and that we stick with gas-powered vehicles. And that's the alternative, right? We're going to have cars for the foreseeable future one way or the other. So we either are going to transition to electric vehicles, or we're going to keep gas-powered vehicles.
Or we develop a better mass transit system.
Or we develop...
I can come up with some other things we can do.
Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles have been gaining interest too.
Which Toyota is interested in.
I think the other thing that's interesting about that particular type of vehicle is while fully electric vehicles probably make a lot of sense for consumer grade things, hydrogen fuel has been of keen interest, especially in aviation potentially, because the weight, at least right now, of batteries is not conducive to certain modes of transportation, right?
Right. We've done shows on
if
that.
You're not on the ground.
Right. The battery is way too much. They can't generate enough force, right?
Right.
For the airplanes
or they can, but you can only fly for 10 minutes.
Right.
So, yeah, we can load the plane with enough battery, but then it's so heavy that, it can't fly very long because...
But hydrogen would be an alternative fuel source rather than gasoline that could do some of what...
That maybe has the potential to do that. So it's not just electric vehicles. It's also other alternatives to, typical gasoline that come into play. But think about what is the worst thing that happens, right? Because I'm going to outline here in a minute what I think it is. And then let's see how bad is it really. Say that we do all this and we transition to EVs and... and we make it all happen. What is the worst thing that happens in that scenario, realistically? Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. The government invests billions of dollars, Lance, in, basically encouraging the transition to electric vehicles and the associated infrastructure along with that. That involves, making more charging stations available, but also charging in places that are convenient for folks, like when they go shopping or go to restaurants, but also improving the access of fast chargers. We talked a little bit about technology in terms of where it has to get to or where it's not yet at. One of the points, that you wanted to know about, well, how do we make it so I can charge, in 5 minutes, like I stopped 5 minutes to fill up for gas? We can do it. We already have prototypes in the works that basically, do that very thing. Will
we do it like a gas station? Is that a business model that's out there? Like somebody will sell you the electricity, well,
that's how it works right now.
To do that.
On the rare occasion that I visit a fast charger, and we've talked about this before, but folks, in the last, since owning an EV, I've probably been at a fast charger, I don't know, 10 times. And I've had an EV for, 3 years right now. Right. So not very often, in my case. Now, I also own a single family home and have a charger in my garage, right? So from that standpoint, there wouldn't be a reason that I'd want to use a fast charger very often, because why would I want to pay somebody else more to use their electricity and their charger than pay less?
When you've also paid to have solar panels on your house to create your electricity.
Yeah.
So all of these things go in place. You can just charge at home. and it makes sense.
Right. Well, and it's convenient. I mean,
Right.
why would I stop someplace and wait 5 minutes?
That's what I was saying.
If I go home and just plug it in and then in the morning unplug it, now I didn't wait 5 minutes. I took less than 60 seconds.
But that's my point to earlier in the show is that paradigm shift. See, right now, you don't have to do anything else. Right. If I bought one, I would have to think, okay, where am I going to do my shopping or eating based on my EV needs to be powered?
Well, and I think what you're going to see is, I mean, my guess is 20 or 30 years from now, the prevalence of the gas station as we know it today.
Oh, I hope I see it. Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. I hope 20 to 30 years from now that you can pick me up and take me out and see that.
Yeah, then we can go take a look
What am I going to see 20 if I'm still around 20 to 30 years?
I think we'll see a lot less of the traditional gas station that we see today.
Okay.
Because the other thing is, gas stations have been built around that notion that basically everybody needs them, right? I mean, if you own a car, you got to have them. You don't need as many.
Where am I going to get my Slurpee and my beef jerky stick?
You don't need as many fast charging stations,
right?
As you do gas stations,
because people will be charging at home
or at work or while they're at the store. You know what I mean? Really, when you need a fast charger, the number of people that need them are less, and when you need them, when everybody needs them, is when you do a road trip, right? I mean, that's like you're going to need a fast charger just like you would a gas station. That probably is not going to change. But for people like Lance or maybe somebody that, only has on-street parking because they rent and like they can't charge at home for whatever reason, it's just not an option. They have to stop somewhere and use fast chargers. You're still going to drastically decrease the number of total locations that you need and also where locations need to be. If you're out in the middle of nowhere, you may not see that gas station may not convert to a manned electric vehicle charging station because there's just, you still need the station, but it's not going to get used as often because it's mostly for people that are passing through or don't have access to it. So I think you're going to see a big change in prevalence of gas stations and also what they look like. Most fast charging stations right now are not in a gas station setting. Like a lot of them sit in a Walmart parking lot. You pull in, plug in, charge, and then you leave.
And do you pay for those?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you almost always you pay for fast charging.
I mean, I have relatives who have EVs and they live in California. And when they visited me when I went to Arizona last fall, they made their trip home. They planned it out. Well, we're going to stop for lunch here because it has a charger here. So I guess I'm being very, contrary with you today, but I do understand it. I have seen
a lot of people have those.
They do that though. I mean, they plan their road trip home and they know it's going to take them. Well, I'm going to stop to eat anyway, or I want to pick these things up anyway. And they find it on the map, right? With their GPS. Oh, here's where I have a station. But when you go to that, and here's my question, you have to, if I stop at the restaurant or I go to Target or whatever and do some shopping, do I pay for the electricity that I use there? Or is the store and restaurant providing that for me right now to get me there?
It depends. If it's a fast charger, right, you're almost always paying. Almost always. If it's a level 2, which is like what you use at home, for example, some places offer that as a courtesy.
And does that make a difference? Like if I'm going to run in and do 30 minutes worth of shopping or 45 minutes for dinner and it's a level 2, can I actually get in if I plug it in and walk in and do my thing and come back out 30 to 45 minutes later? Is it even worth doing?
Well, I shop at Kroger a lot, right? Locally. So let's say that Kroger puts in a level 2 charger in their parking lot. It doesn't cost anything. I pull in, I plug in, I walk in, and I come out an hour later, from grocery shopping. I will have probably picked up between 25 and 30 miles of drivable range approximately.
So about 10%. 10 to 20% of what you can get.
Yes.
In that time. Okay.
I mean, I guess look at it this way. If you were going to stop at a restaurant and somebody said, I'm going to give you 20 or 30 miles of free gas just cause you're here.
Give you a free gallon of gas.
I mean, is there anybody that would be like, nah? I mean, who's going to be, no, I don't want that. You know what I mean? Is it enough? Could you subside on that on an ongoing basis? No, probably not. But is it a nice benefit? Does it help in the overall equation? Yes. The other thing is, my guess is we're going to see a lot of that decrease in terms of the availability of free level 2 charging. Because again, when it's a niche thing and there's only certain people that have it, offering that's kind of a nice little perk to attract those people in. Money. Right. Yeah. Not a big deal. But, okay, if your whole parking lot has chargers and you got 50 cars in the lot and they're all like now we're talking about a lot of money, even if it's not fast charging, because it's just that's a lot of power. A lot of
electricity.
Right.
Okay, so you promised our listeners, what's the worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario.
So what is our worst case scenario in your opinion with this issue?
I mean, I think that the realistic worst case scenario is that our government continues to push the adoption of these vehicles, and that we put billions of dollars into the economy trying to make this transition, probably many tens of billions by the time it's done. Because you're not just talking about the cars, right? You're talking about the infrastructure that makes the cars possible, the manufacturing. So if we increase U.S. manufacturing jobs, right? We increase domestic production of all kinds of components, not just for electric vehicles, but because a lot of the people that make stuff for electric vehicles will also make, like, for example, battery manufacturers. Yeah, we make batteries for electric vehicles, but we may also make batteries for other things too.
Well, there's all kinds of microchips in my gas-powered vehicle as well.
Microchip, like there's a new plant going in Ohio. Intel's putting in a new plant. Well, they'll make lots of different microchips, not just for cars, but for all kinds of things. So you're increasing local U.S. manufacturing. You're increasing stability. The pandemic obviously brought forth a lot of supply chain issues. The more that we control locally versus being reliant on shipping across the oceans.
But that's all good stuff. So what's the worst? So what's the bad part of this?
The bad part is, I guess, that we would spend all that money and we all transition to electric vehicles and we're like, yeah, this isn't quite as good as gas vehicles. But I don't see how, when we say likely, that doesn't seem likely. At worst, I think we make the transition 10 years from now. The vehicles that are being sold 10 years from now, you'll fast charge and be full in 5 minutes, right? And you'll be able to go pretty much anywhere that you would right now and fill up, charge. So nothing has changed except you've got a car that lasts longer. You can still go as far. And we've stimulated our economy and increased local manufacturing, which I think is something that all parties want. But especially the Republican Party. I mean, for conservatives that have been concerned about this transition, I would think that increasing American-made products would be something that would help offset that hesitation.
See, the worst case, I'm just going to throw this in right here at the end. We really don't have time to discuss it, but I think the worst case scenario is rapid inflation. Because I remember when we started going overseas for products in the 70s. And it was because it was cheaper, because people were getting paid, less than $1 an hour. I mean, when minimum wage in the United States was $3.35. Okay.
Energy grid failure is another big
energy grid failure. But I can see rapid inflation because the reason we went overseas in the first place, companies couldn't figure out how to make a profit, because to pay the American worker what they deserved or what they needed to live on was going to increase the cost of the product more than what people would be willing to pay for the product. And so while I think it's wonderful, and I know that my grandparents would be rolling in their grave with happiness right now that American jobs are coming back in the manufacturing sector, the reason we lost them in the first place was cost cutting. And so to bring them back and say, well, we can make this person in Southeast Asia, they can make the product for $1.25 an hour, but we're going to pay the same person in the United States $20 an hour. Some cost is going up somewhere. Somebody's going to pay the differential.
And I think it's a front end cost. And what I mean by that is manufacturing in the 70s versus manufacturing today. the level of automation is drastically different. And this is hopefully going to be a future episode, because I just heard a great conversation about this that I think is very important for folks to understand. When we say manufacturing is coming back to the US, that doesn't mean manufacturing of 40 years ago is coming back to the US. It means that high-tech manufacturing is coming to the US, right? Intel's building a plant. Are you going to have people
So you'll have one
covered from
human-
head to toe in dirt at the Intel plant, having put in a hot, sweaty day with no AC in the factory floor? No.
You'll have one person handling 20 robots.
Right.
There'll be one human job to program and fix 20 robots
Monitor,
that are doing the
oversee.
work.
Yes. So,
Which exists right now.
and they'll be
I
working
have
in an
former
environment
students-
that's clean, climate
Yes.
controlled.
Right.
I mean, are they manufacturing jobs? Yes. But again, we have to do that thing of, even when we've toured local factories and they don't make, computer chips and that kind of stuff, just the huge change in the last 50 years or so of what constitutes most manufacturing is not dirty, heavy industry. Most of it's medium to light industry,
And not necessarily done by humans.
Right. The humans are involved in the oversight, planning, programming, execution, repair, but often a lot of the hard labor or the dangerous work isn't done by people. And not just because we want to protect people or because it's expensive to pay people to do it, but because the machines are better at doing it than we are.
They don't make as many mistakes. They show up to work every day.
They don't get tired.
And they don't get tired.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to, you may have to pay a lot for that robot up front, but if you keep it serviced, the companies have done the math.
Which is what the
and
humans
said,
do.
This is cheaper. Well, if I'm going to buy this robot and it's going to be in Asia, or I'm going to buy this robot and it's going to be in the United States, now, because I only need one person for the 20 robots, which again is just an example, now my shipping cost is no longer justified to ship it across the ocean.
It's
right?
still cost effective.
Even though I have to pay the American worker more, I don't have to move it as far. So now I am saving money, in
In other
shifting.
areas.
Right. So I guess that's where, no, that's not true in all cases, but to provide
that's fair.
The other side of
That's
that,
a
I
good
think
answer.
that's important for people to keep in mind, is that these jobs are very different, and they're also not necessarily low skill jobs either. But there's the other worst case thing of, we're already in a labor shortage. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do about that? Different show though. So why we have this conversation today, Lance? What was the point?
Well, because here at True Chat, we have a mission. And that mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And I feel like we've done that today, and hopefully you do too. And as you share this show with your family and friends, if they say, well, I'd like to listen to that podcast, that sounds like a good addition to my day, tell them that they can find us as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning as a podcast. Those same episodes are heard on AM and FM radio stations across the country and through parts of Canada. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.